The real story of the Sallie House, America's most documented haunting. If you're brave enough to stay until the end, subscribe. Some stories don't just stay on screen, they follow you. The tour guide didn't expect anyone to scream. Not in the middle of the afternoon, with sunlight pouring through the old windows of the house on North 2nd Street. But the moment the visitor stepped into the nursery room, her knees buckled. She grabbed the doorway, shaking, insisting that someone had been standing in the corner, watching her, breathing behind her ear. Except the room was empty. The guide had seen this before. The silent panic, the quick exit, the refusal to ever return. The Sallie House had that effect on people. But long before it became a stop for the curious and the skeptical, it was a home. A normal, quiet, ordinary home. In 1992, Tony and Deborah Pickman didn't move in looking for a story. They were expecting their first child. They wanted a place with a little yard, friendly neighbors, and room to grow. The kind of place where life was supposed to get easier, warmer, more hopeful. For a while, it was. The disturbances began as small things. Lights flickering even after bulbs were replaced. Electrical outlets seeming to spark without cause. Toys rearranging themselves during the night. Deborah was the first to notice, but she brushed it off. A new baby meant sleepless nights. Fatigue could play tricks on anyone. Tony tried to laugh it off when he first heard the footsteps. Light, soft, like a child running from room to room. He checked every corner of the house more than once. Nothing. No intruder. No animal. No explanation. Weeks passed. The atmosphere inside the house shifted. Tony described it as the feeling of being observed from behind your shoulder. A staring presence. A weight in the silence. Then, one night, Tony woke up gasping. His forearm burned. He turned on the lamp and saw what looked like fresh scratches running across his skin. He hadn't been alone in that room. The house had started to choose him. Tony tried to explain away the scratches. Maybe he'd hit his arm on the bed frame. Maybe it was an allergic reaction. Maybe anything. Anything except the possibility that the house itself had done it. But something about the marks bothered him. They were thin, parallel, and strangely even, as if made intentionally. Deborah noticed the change in him almost immediately. He had become quieter, distracted, always glancing toward the hallway before turning off the lights. Life in the house continued, but it didn't feel like living. It felt like waiting. Waiting for something to happen. Waiting for the next sound, the next shadow, the next night. Their newborn son's room seemed to be the center of the unease. The baby would cry in sudden fits, his eyes looking past his parents, as if focused on someone else in the room, someone they couldn't see. The nursery toys began activating on their own. Wind-up mechanisms twisted without being touched. Music played at odd hours. Not loud, but faint, like a whisper of a melody barely remembered. Deborah started sleeping with the hallway light on. Tony, who once laughed at the idea of ghosts, now checked every room before bed. One evening, as the two sat in the living room, the baby monitor crackled. They expected muffled breathing, maybe small cries. Instead, they heard what sounded like a soft giggle, a child's laugh, the kind that should have been innocent, but instead felt out of place and cold. They rushed upstairs. The nursery was empty except for their son, sleeping soundly. Deborah's hands shook as she turned to Tony. "Someone is in this house," she whispered. Over the next few days, Tony began seeing movement from the corner of his eye. A shape, small, like a child standing just out of view. The more he tried to ignore it, the more it lingered. And then one night, as he stood in the kitchen, he saw it clearly for the first time. A small figure, motionless, at the end of the hallway. Not moving, not speaking, just watching him. And when he blinked, It was gone. But the house felt colder now, like it knew he had finally seen it. The house no longer felt like a place they lived in. It felt like a place they were sharing, with something that didn't belong to them. Tony began to dread going to sleep. Every night brought the same sensation, the awareness of being watched, not from afar, but close. Too close. As if something stood beside the bed, leaning over him in the dark. Deborah tried to stay strong, telling herself it was stress, exhaustion, the weight of being new parents. But the breaking point came quietly, in a moment that should have been gentle. She was rocking her son to sleep when the temperature of the room shifted. The air grew still, heavy, and she felt it, a presence just behind her shoulder, as though someone stood close enough to breathe against her neck. She didn't turn around. She couldn't. The next morning, Tony agreed they needed help. Not rumors, not stories. Real evidence. They contacted a small paranormal research group known for documenting unexplained phenomena with scientific equipment rather than ghost stories. The team arrived with cameras, audio recorders, and electromagnetic sensors. The moment they entered, one of the investigators paused just beyond the threshold. He said the house felt charged, not dangerous, but aware, like someone already knew they were there. Over the next several nights, they recorded everything. The cameras captured faint movements of shadow along the walls, not like human silhouettes, but small, quick flickers, low to the ground. The audio recorders caught light taps, soft footsteps, and faint whimpers that didn't match the baby's breathing patterns. The strangest recordings were the cold spots, areas in the room where the temperature dropped suddenly by several degrees, forming shapes in the patterns of the temperature maps. Shapes roughly the size of a child. The lead investigator tried to approach the situation rationally. He suggested the presence might be tied to emotion, to something unresolved, something that hadn't found peace. But Tony didn't feel sympathy. He felt targeted. And the more the investigators documented, the more intense the activity became. It was as if the house didn't want to be studied. It wanted to be understood. Or worse, remembered. The investigators continued their work, but something had changed. The house wasn't just reacting anymore. It was responding. As if it understood the attention it was receiving, and chose to direct it. And almost all of it focused on Tony. He grew restless, unable to sit still. The quiet moments felt the worst. He described the sensation as being singled out in a crowded room, even when the room is empty. His eyes looked tired, distant, like he hadn't slept in days. The others in the house felt uneasy, but Tony felt hunted. One evening, as the team gathered in the living room reviewing recordings, the baby monitor crackled again. At first it was static, then a slow, rhythmic breathing. Not heavy, just steady. Too steady. Everyone froze. Someone whispered to Tony, "Is someone in the nursery?" They rushed upstairs. The baby was asleep, untouched, but every toy in the room was turned, facing the crib. Dolls, stuffed animals, wooden figures, all positioned toward the child, in perfect alignment. Deborah's hand covered her mouth. Tony stepped back, shaking his head, whispering, "No, no." The investigators tried to remain composed, documenting everything, but their expressions betrayed the same fear that had taken root in the family weeks before. Whatever was in the house was no longer subtle. It was communicating through arrangement, presence, and atmosphere. Then, late one night, Tony experienced what he later described as the moment everything shifted. He had gotten up to get water. The hallway felt darker than usual, as if the walls were absorbing the light instead of reflecting it. Halfway to the kitchen, he froze. There, just a few feet away, stood the small figure again. This time it wasn't just a shape or a shadow. It looked solid. Like a little girl, no older than 6, standing barefoot on the wooden floor. Her head was slightly lowered, her hair framing her face. She didn't move. She didn't speak. But Tony felt something behind the sight. A pressure, a plea, and something angry beneath it. As he blinked, the figure vanished, but the hallway didn't feel empty afterward. It felt occupied. And that was the moment Tony realized. The house wasn't just haunted, it was aware of him. The investigators compiled every recording, temperature reading, and documented account. They brought in a historian from the Atchison Historical Society to look into the house's past. If there was an explanation, it would be in the records, not in rumors. And that's when the first trace of the story emerged. Decades earlier, a doctor had lived in the house. He treated patients in the front room, which had once been converted into a small home clinic. According to one account, a young girl had been brought in with a severe condition. The treatment was rushed. The outcome was tragic. Records from the era were limited, and not every detail could be confirmed. But the town whispered that the child had been frightened, confused, and in pain when she passed. Whether the story was precise fact or local memory reshaped by time, it left something behind. A tragedy connected to a child who never had the chance to understand what happened to her. Some believed the presence in the house wasn't violent, only trapped, confused, and searching. But Tony didn't feel comfort in that. The figure had focused on him from the beginning. If it was seeking recognition, or apology, or simply acknowledgement, he did not know how to give it. The family made their decision quietly. They packed their belongings and left the house behind. They didn't make statements to the press. They didn't tell neighbors stories. They just left. Because they understood something that only those who have lived in an active haunting understand. Not every presence wants to leave. Some remain because the moment they are remembered, they exist again. Over the years, countless visitors, researchers, and skeptics entered the Sallie House expecting tricks or exaggeration, and many of them left silent. A few reported cold spots. Some reported being touched, and a handful swore they saw a small figure in the corner of a room, watching them with a stillness that felt too real to dismiss. The house remains open to this day, and according to those who live nearby, the lights inside still turn on at night, even when the building is locked and empty. If this story stayed with you, there are others. Some houses don't forget, and some memories never leave.